second generation, as well as what grade you're in if you, what grade your child is in if you are a parent. So I do know that many of us have also used this time to self-reflect because we have been through so much during the pandemic, and we also realize the true importance of communicating with those around us. So I see in the chat that we have someone who's in the second generation and they're in fourth grade. Now I'm going to assume that this is fourth grade in elementary school, and that is very impressive that you're on this call. I didn't think we would be having such young people entering the Zoom call, so that is very cool. So for those of you just coming in, again, please type in the chat if you're a first or second generation Chinese American. Also tell us where you're calling from, what grade you're in, or what grade your child is in if you are a parent. So again, I'm going to mention that over the pandemic, we've all been through so much, and this has also been a good time to self-reflect and learn about interacting with those around us. So you can also type in the chat what you've learned about yourself or about others over the pandemic. Personally, I've learned a lot about how I interact with others, and I use this knowledge to improve my communication with my family every day. So let's see some of the other responses in the chat. Someone says their son is only 7 years old. That's also very impressive. First generation parent. Oh, Chicago. I used to live in Chicago, but I'm living in Palo Alto, which is near Stanford in California now. Wow, attending college. Chinese Canadian. Okay, we have some Canadians here. That's, wow. Wow, we're global now.
At least, so maybe we just start. So now we officially start the webinar. Okay. So let me share my screen.
That sounds good.
Then, yeah.
Okay, so should I wait for you to share screen? Yeah, that sounds good. All right. So for those of you here, just type in the chat what you've learned or about yourself or about others over the pandemic. Now let's go on to introducing the event. First, I want to give a special thanks to the Coffee Club and Viswise for hosting this event. I'm going to use Chinese to introduce them. So 我就用中文介绍他们一下。首先感谢华人咖啡俱乐部。大家都知道华人俱乐部是一个帮助北美华人共同成长的家园。2017年成立，是一个非常有活力的华人社区平台，给我们提供了上百场公益讲座。非常感谢咖啡俱乐部的 Angeline 和所有的员工。思慧 ，OK， yeah 思慧学院的是华人咖啡俱乐部的教育品牌，给各年级的学生提供多种教育和培训，也给成年人提供各种培训。欢迎各位关注。报名参加适合你的培训，价格非常优惠，项目特别好，欢迎加入咖啡俱乐部和思辉社群，北美华人精英很多都在这里。So now, before we introduce our special guest, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Elise, and I'm currently a high school student in Silicon Valley, California. I will be leading the discussion regarding the generational gap between Chinese American parents and their children today. So let's go on to introduce our special guest. Today, we are very honored to have Dr. Paul Lee with us. Paul Lee is the founder of Calvin J. Lee Memorial Foundation, whose mission is to help bridge the cultural gap between Asian immigrant parents and their American-born children, as well as raise the awareness of emotional well-being of the children and promote a supportive and social family environment for the children to reach their full potential. He also serves as a member of the board of directors for United Chinese Americans, as well as the Chinese Culture and Community Service Center known as CCACC. Paul is also the founder of FHL Investment Management Company, serving investment needs for individuals and institutions. Previously, he was a partner and senior equity analyst at Brown Advisory, a Baltimore-based investment management company. Paul obtained his PhD and MBA from Cornell University and a master's degree from Chinese Academy of Sciences, as well as a bachelor's degree from Wuhan University. Paul came to the US in 1991 from China. He now lives with his wife and daughter in Rockville, Maryland. Okay, now let's go on to the main event. For the format of this event, Paul and I will be discussing some prompts concerning generational gaps between Chinese American parents and children. If you have questions during the discussion, feel free to type them in English during the conversation for better efficiency. I will do my best to ask questions pertaining to the conversation that you type in the chat. However, you can also wait until the end to ask questions yourself. And during the questioning period, feel free to ask your questions in either English or Chinese. Again, before we begin, I also want to encourage people to turn their cameras on because it's very nice to see people's faces and it makes the conversation more welcoming for everyone. So I'm just gonna look at the chat and see what people have written for a second. Oh, thank you about my Chinese. I've been working on it over the pandemic. Yes, and it is important to stress your mental health over the pandemic. Yes, we have some 7th grade and 10th grade children in the chat. I'm personally going to be in 12th grade. I was just in 11th grade, so I see some 11th graders in the chat as well. All right, so let's start with a main question. Paul, with your experience helping parents and children struggling with depression, how has your perception of the younger generation changed over time? And do you think this view of the second generation is similar to or different from other immigrant parents?
Elise, I want to first say that I'm also impressed by your Chinese, especially your effort today here. Yeah, I know it's pretty difficult. My daughter hates going to Chinese school, so I understand it's pretty difficult. Before we start, I also want to say thanks to Wisdom Academy. I also want to thank Kathy Peng for making the connection. I'm very happy to be here to meet everyone over Zoom. I know it's a Saturday evening, 9 o'clock. I'm very thankful and honored that you are tuning in to listen to us, and it's a precious time on your part. I will do my best to be helpful, to be informative to you all. So to answer your question first, I want to say that I'm not an expert on parenting or child psychology. I'm speaking from my experience as an immigrant parent raising two very different children, both born in the US, one fully embracing her identity while the other having a lot of struggles with it. So my experience, both positive and negative, I think have taught me good lessons, valuable lessons, and I want to share that lesson with everybody. So regarding the second generation, you know, from a traditional Chinese point of view, we view our children as an extension of our own lives. So we definitely love our children because we love them as we love ourselves. But there's also a downside to that, is that we overlooked their individuality. So I am growing more appreciative of their individuality of our second generation. In terms of the second generation, we have a perception that they're just like us. But in fact, they are not like us. We grew up outside of US. We grew up in a quite different environment. They grew up here in the US. They have very faint idea of our motherland, China or Taiwan or Singapore, whatever you are coming from. Our children don't have the same affinity or same emotional attachment to the place where we came from. So that's something we don't naturally understand. Sometimes we feel like they're just like us. They have the same feeling, they have the same understanding we have, but they don't. I think I am growing more aware of their American identity. I also becoming more sympathetic of their struggles and the challenges they face every single day. And I think the next generation, the immigrant children born in America, they're the least understood generation. They're not understood fully by their parents, right? I just described a lot of biases we have regarding our children. We don't understand their struggles in the school. And because we don't have that kind of struggle, we grew up in a quite different environment. And so they're not fully understood by us, and they're not fully understood by the society, by their teachers as well. Especially they are burdened by the so-called model minority. They are also burdened by a lot of stereotypes, like because you are an Asian, you must be good at math. If you're not good at math, you are a failure. So there are a lot of expectation from the society our children felt like they have to live up to. That put a lot of pressure, psychological stress on them. So that's the part I think is least understood by the parents. That's why, I want to raise the awareness of that. I hope parents can realize that there are a lot of pressure, a lot of challenges our children are facing. And the family is supposed to be a safe harbor. It's supposed to be a place where our children can find a place to rest, to rejuvenate, to recharge, to feel loved, and to feel accepted. So I think that's the very important message.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of great points there. And I just want to add to that part where you talked about how parents might not necessarily understand the problems that their children are going through. And I think a main issue might just be because, we don't understand how people may have lived in the mainland, because living in America is entirely different. We don't have pretty much any of the problems that the parents may have struggled with when they were moving to America. And so even if our problems seem maybe not as significant, for instance, right, it still impacts us the same way because problems are all viewed in a different scope. I think that's kind of like one of the main issues between the parents and the children is just trying to understand that from a different perspective.
That's a great point, Elise, because when our children complain to us, that's exactly what we would say, that we have gone through much worse than you do.
Yeah.
You guys are growing in the milk and honey. Why are you complaining, right? Yeah. We came from a country where, when I grew up, I didn't even have, at a point, we couldn't have enough food to eat when I grew up. I grew up in 60s. So there's a certain time point, 60s to 70s. I was born in the 60s. So there's certain time point. We went through a lot of hardship. Yeah. That's why we take light of anything our children going through. We say, be tough. So we oftentimes using our own experience to judge our own children, feeling that they should behave just like us. So that's a great point. I think, we need to be more sympathetic or empathetic, because they haven't gone through that kind of hardship we have. So it's different for them.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And it's different sets of challenges. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird for the kids too, to be hearing that their parents have gone through so many issues. And then when they try to complain about something, it's just sort of, it seems really ignorant to be complaining about, oh, I have this struggle with a friend and it's making me very sad. Well, it's entirely different from, you know, some problems that you guys had to deal with when you were growing up.
Yeah, but I think it's a good suggestion for the parents out there is, instead of teaching them dry lessons or preaching lessons to them, tell your story. Tell how you grew up without any judgment. Just tell the story, and your children will be impressed. And the story will be more powerful in terms of educating them than the preaching and the dry lessons. So I think telling a story would be good.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say tell a story, because I know a lot of my my friends whose parents, they're always like, oh, my parents are always telling me to, you know, do this or do that, and I don't really understand why. And I know that's something that my parents have done that has allowed me to feel kind of like to listen to them more, is just when they tell me what's happened in their past and they've told me their history. And so then even if they continue with the dry lessons, I sort of intercept it better because I understand where they're coming from. Whereas if they just tell me, oh, you don't have it as bad, like it could be way worse, it's just, it doesn't really make much sense. But that's understandable. So I'm going to go on to the next question. It's sort of relating to about how the kids, they don't really feel confident about their issues or feel confident about who they're going to become, because again, their parents have gone through so much, and many of their parents are so successful. It's hard to compare to that, and it's hard to be confident about themselves. So how do you think children can feel more confident about themselves, and how do you think parents can help their children feel more confident?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. Many of us, the first generation immigrants, we worked very hard. We took a lot of risk to come to the States, and we worked hard to come to the place where we are. We feel like our children should do much better than we do, right? So we set pretty high expectations for them to succeed. And I think there is a phenomenon that the more successful the parents are, the more stress they will put on their children to succeed, because they feel like, you know, I've created this environment for you to succeed, and if you don't, that's such a waste of the resources, and it would be very disappointing, right? So that pressure is certainly on our children. So building up the confidence in our children, I think the most important part, I would think, is the affirmation from the parents. You know, we are born to seek acceptance. Everyone is born to seek acceptance. I think the parental acceptance is the most important part. If we don't accept our children who they are, we accept them who they are, not what they do, right? Not what they accomplished. If we don't do that, they will try to please other people. They will try to please their peers. Wherever they go, they try to please other people. That's a very dangerous thing. So I think affirmation from parents is so critical to build our children's self-confidence. So what do I mean by affirmation? I would say we have a tendency to see the flaws in our children. We tend to see the flaws and see the strength in other kids. You know, the neighbor's kids always better. You know, some kind of like that kind of feeling. I would say that obviously I had the same issues, especially with my son. I had a high expectation, especially in Chinese culture. A son is supposed to carry the family name. And that's why the son actually bears a lot of burden of the family. So I tend to look at his flaws rather than trying to see and able to see and discover his talent and his strength. I think we need to change the perspective. We need to discover and recognize and appreciate the uniqueness of our children. Each one of them are different. I just said my daughter and my son, they're quite different. And you have to appreciate the uniqueness of each individual child and help them to develop their different talents. Don't compare them with other kids because they're different. And you really don't, there is a funny story. I like to compare my son to other kids, and then my son will compare me to other parents. So that's his way, a very smart way to fight back, So it's the same, if you compare your child with other child, what prevents your child to compare you with other parents, right? Exactly. So don't compare because each one is different and they have different uniqueness. I think also we need to encourage our kids to be different, to develop their uniqueness rather than to be the same as others. And so, and one of the important thing is feeling proud of being different and unique is very helpful in terms of the child developing their own identity. So that's very important. Discover their talents and their unique strengths, and then help them to develop that talent. I mean, I have to say that being good at something does build up confidence, right? So you have to be good at something. So I think our job as parents is to discover what our child is naturally talented in what aspect, right? And then help him or her to fully develop that talent. And so they will feel a sense of accomplishment. They will feel proud of themselves. Instead of trying to compare your child with others, you trying to, just focus on what they can do, what they can achieve. And the last concept I would say is the concept of unconditional love.
Right.
What do I mean by that? So imagine, what if your child is just average person? Do you still love that child, right? Not every child is above average. It's not like Lake Wobegon. Every child is above average. No, by math, there will be people who are below average, people who are above average. That's just the reality. What if God made your child just ordinary people, just an ordinary child, no special talents? Do you still love your child? So the unconditional love is that regardless what they can achieve, you love them just as they are, because they are your sons and daughters. And there's no condition that your sons and daughter has to get an A on all the classes in order to gain your love and acceptance. Your love and acceptance should be unconditional. So if we can build up, if we can affirm their self-value, their self-worth, which is not dependent on their grades, which is not dependent on how much they accomplish, how successful they can be, it's just because their individuality. If we can affirm their value within our home, our child will go out into the society feeling proud, feeling self-confident.
Yes, I think you brought up so many great points there. I'm just going to emphasize a couple that were also emphasized in the chat. So someone said the lack of one or both parents' affirmation leaves some children emotionally crippled. And I think the affirmation of even small things is so important. I have so many classmates who are always trying to seek affirmation from their classmates through good grades, through like the smallest accomplishments. And you can just tell that they just really have low self-confidence and they really want to get affirmation from somewhere and that they're not getting it from home. And that's why it's really important to make sure that, you're constantly, telling your child what you appreciate about them or what you like about them. Because when you do that, you really build up their confidence and you really make them feel, oh, I can actually do this, And someone else said, never compare your kids to others. They all have their own thing. And yeah, no one should ever compare themselves to anyone or anything like that, especially not with the smallest things. Again, with people who are always seeking acceptance in the classroom or at school, they're always kind of quantifying themselves with others, asking other people in the classroom, what grade do you have? And trying to measure that. So a lot of times this kind of competition in the classroom also comes from home and the way that their home environment is. And I think it's important to just try to compare people less because it helps everyone else out a little more.
Yeah, well, when I talk about not comparing your child with others, I have gotten some negative responses from some parents. Some parents feel like it's a motivating factor for their child, right? They believe that if you compare your child with a more successful one, that will motivate your child to achieve the same success. So I think when we compare our child with somebody else, we're conditioning our child to build their confidence and their happiness on being better than other people. I think that's that will have some consequences down the road when the child grow up and enter the society. The society is not just competitive society; it's also a collaborative society, right? Especially in the modern society, it's so specialized. Not a single person can accomplish. Everyone needs to depend on other people, need to partner with other people and collaborate with other people in order to achieve something, right? Any industry is like that. No single person can do them all. And the mentality of always trying to compare, trying to compete with other people is a big hindrance in career success, professional success. And it's also the personality is not welcome in the workplace either. Highly competitive person are not welcomed by your colleagues. But the person who are kind to others, who can see other people's strength, see other people's merits, see what other people are good at, and not feeling that if I feel somebody else is good at, that means it's a put down of myself. Not having that feeling. If you have the mentality always comparing with other people, you will have that feeling, right? You cannot praise other people. You will refuse to praise other people or even when you praise other people, you're just feigning it. you're not genuinely appreciating other people's contribution. So I think prepare our children for the future, for the society. We need to recognize their uniqueness rather than always compare them. So they will not go out compare themselves with other people. They will becoming more friendlier to other people. They will appreciate other people's strengths, other people's appreciate other people more. Yeah.
Yeah, so I see so many things being brought up in the chat that are very great points. A lot of people are talking about the identity issues that you were mentioning. People need to find what makes them unique and what they're proud of doing. And a lot of people say, yeah, those identity issues definitely come from home because those are the people that you are around the most. And especially during the pandemic, when you're around these people 24/7, that could definitely have a huge impact on your mental health because you're thinking about, oh, I can't really do what makes me unique anymore. I can't go outside. I can't, pursue what I'm interested in. And some people, they don't even have anything that they're particularly interested in because they're not thinking about that. They're, from my perspective, there are quite a few parents who don't emphasize finding out who you are. It's more so just pursuing something and being successful in life. So you said for parents to help their children find what is unique about them and find a passion to pursue. So what do you have to say for parents with children who seem to have less motivation for finding those kind of things?
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think my personal experience is that my son always knew what he wanted to do. And even sometimes his goal is very unrealistic in my point of view, but he knew what he wanted to do. But to be honest with you, he was not a good student. He's very athletic, but he was not a good student. My daughter, on the other hand, is a great student, straight A, never had to, I kind of like nagging her to do anything. She's very disciplined. She can do all the things on her own initiative without prodding from the parents. However, she doesn't know what she wants to do. She's not very clear about what she wants to do. I think many parents may be facing the same situation, is that one, that your child may not know at this moment what her or his passion is. I think it requires us to be more patient with them, especially giving them enough space to explore. If we try to do too much in terms of providing them with guidance, we're going to confuse them and making them even more indecisive. That's the tendency. That's the lesson I learned. I overwhelmed my daughter with all kinds of different option suggestions. She would just go so stressed out. She's like, stop, Dad. So you need to give them space and time so they can explore on their own, try and make a mistake, and then try something else. That's life. That's life. And me, it's the same thing. When I grew up in China, I don't think anybody growing up in China know very early on what they want to do. We follow the flow. When everybody was going to graduate school, I went to graduate school. I didn't know what I want to do. And then after graduate school, everyone wanted to come to the United States to study. I did the same. I came to the States and I didn't know what to do. I just followed the flow. And I came to States as a biology major. I did many, many years as a scientist researching in biology, and never questioned whether this was my passion or this was what I was good at. Never questioned that until my son was born. And I started to realize, gosh, I have more responsibility now. I have a family to raise. Can I start to examine my situation? And I was pretty satisfied. I was pretty laid back, going to the lab every day, doing the things day and night. Never thought about my future. I never said I need to save money or for whatever things. I wasn't motivated to make money. I wasn't motivated to build up a successful career. I was just going with the flow. But until my son was born, I started to realize, what should I do? And I talked to mentors. So my mentor in the church provided some advice for me. So he was saying, for you, there are a couple of routes. You can, a lot of my contemporary, my peers, they went to IT. So they changed the career into IT. There is another route is become a patent lawyer. But the mentor told me that based on my assessment of your strengths, I think you should pursue a business career. You should do MBA. I took his advice, and then everything is history, right? So I consider myself having done pretty well given the circumstances. And at age 33, I changed my career. It's pretty late, but I'm very thankful. I feel I'm blessed in every way. So if I could change my career and discover my passion at age 33, your child had so many time ahead of them. Don't be so stressed out. Don't pressure them. Give them enough space and time. Let them explore and let them fail, right? And eventually they will figure it out. Always provide the support. Always be there at their back, supporting them. So that's the important thing. In less judgment, more support. Yeah, don't try to judge them. And sometimes when our child, when they're not very motivated because they fear they could fail. So if we don't normalize failure, then they won't have the courage to fail. If they don't have the courage to fail, they don't try new things. They don't explore. We have to give them the courage to fail. That means we have to normalize failure. When every time the child fails, you make a big fuss about it. Then next time the child won't try anything new, won't take any risk. So that's important. And my son was a risk taker. My daughter doesn't want to take any risk. And I try all the time to encourage her. I think it's important.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to mention a couple of things here. So with finding what you're interested in, a lot of people don't know what they're interested in. And I think people, they didn't really have that time to think about what they're interested in either, because everyone has a different past. But in China, way back then, didn't really have that many options. It was kind of like you choose this career, that's what's going to get you, further in life, right? But now when we're so well off, the parents are so well off, the kids have a lot to think about, and they see so many different things. They have no clue what they want to do in life. And you're right, the only way to find what you're interested in is to explore and not to fear failure. So that's again with affirmation. Affirmation is really going to build up confidence and have your child sort of take more risk. And I guess I'll talk about my experience a little bit with that. So I'm kind of like your daughter. I'm still kind of confused on what I'm most interested in, because there are just so many interests to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that are interesting in the world. But I'm happy that I have things that I'm interested in. And that's what's important. It's not just going for something because other people tell me to go for it. So when I was younger, I would not audition for anything. I didn't go into any clubs. I didn't do anything because I was just scared of meeting other people and of being seen. But as I, went through the pandemic and I went through my sophomore and junior year, I realized that in order to, learn more about what I'm interested in, I really need to put myself out there. For instance, I play bass for my school orchestra, which is a really unusual instrument. And I put myself in that position to kind of really take a risk. And there's this position called chamber orchestra, which is an advanced orchestra. And you have to audition for it. And I never auditioned for it, ever, because I was so afraid of being rejected. I was so afraid of saying, oh, unfortunately, we can't have you for this term. But then over the pandemic, I really understood how much I loved my instrument, and I finally auditioned and I got in. So you really never know what's going to happen unless you take that risk. Even though there's a consequence, having that sort of feeling of achievement from succeeding and taking that risk is way more satisfying than just following the same path and expecting what's coming. So
yeah, at least a good role model for a lot of young people. I mean, it's, our kids need to pursue a diverse range of careers, not just engineering, science, medical fields. We need a representation in a diverse range of professions. And it's important for the whole community. It's also important for each of us individually to, fulfill the different type of interests and passions. And if we all narrowly competing in a very narrow path, we are going to beat each other so much. And it's not going to be very easy. I mean, that's a good segue into the college admission. If we all compete in the same field, it's going to be very difficult. For example, if you're applying, if an Asian is applying in, let's say, political science, public policy, I think it's probably a lot easier to get in there than applying some, the typical Asian career path. So be different is very important.
Yeah, and it's significant to mention that a lot of parents, again, I said, there are probably quite a few parents who don't know what's unique about themselves or don't have that kind of strength to find what they're interested in. I personally don't think that that's like necessarily something that keeps your child from finding what they're interested in, because you're all growing together. It's not just, oh, you have to experience it for your child to experience it.
Right.
But for the parents who are concerned that they're not finding what they're interested in, I know that you, Paul, have a lot of experience with kind of exploring different careers and finding things that you enjoy. So what advice would you give to parents who maybe haven't found that sort of uniqueness? What advice would you give to them to guide their children?
You mean to guide their children? I think, I recognize it's difficult for us, the parents, because to be honest with you, the immigrants, we were faced with a lot limited choices, right? The reason I was able to came here because I have financial support. If I want to get financial support, I have to choose certain areas where there's a need. That means Americans don't want to pursue that area. And so they have to have foreigners to fill that position. So I got it here through that. I think, because of that, we don't know a lot about other fields, especially in the business. I have most of my friends, they're more in the technical fields rather than in the business field. There is a big invisible wall between the business side and the technical side. It's really hard to cross that wall, and it's very difficult. I think each one of us need mentors, especially for the kids. If we cannot, as parents, if we cannot give our children the kind of guidance or provide them with the kind of network they need, I think we need to encourage our children to seek out mentors for themselves, to not just focus on developing technical skills, which is important, but also develop interpersonal skills. That's the other aspect that we tend not to emphasize, but which is very important. So you have to be able to have both skills in order to succeed.
Yeah, I agree. I think interpersonal skills are so crucial.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I always thought it was, focus on grades. It's like the most important thing. And I never really thought, I didn't really volunteer that much in the classroom, and I didn't really talk to my classmates as much as I should have. I only talked to my friends because I didn't really think much about it. It wasn't really something that was emphasized when I was growing up. But yeah, as you go into high school, you kind of learn, you really need to communicate with others. That's one of the most important things. And so going on to that, something important about having interpersonal skills is being able to communicate with others, especially your family. So growing closer to your family is important for building up your interpersonal and communication skills. So the next question is, how can parents get closer to their children while still being able to guide them? As in, how can a parent kind of be a friend, but still kind of have authority in their household?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think this is the area where we have a lot of problems in our families, in our Chinese community. How do we be both a good parent and a good friend to our children? I think on the parenting side, obviously we want to we cannot, our role as a parent is important. We cannot abdicate that role, right? I think in the US, I think there are some issues with the underperforming children. That's because their parents are not playing their roles. The parents are not on top of things. They're not keeping an eye on their children. They're not setting the standard, setting the requirements. I think that's the role we need to play. That's why we need to be a parent. We need to be the guide. We need to be the one setting the standards. And I think we Chinese have done very well in that aspect. But on the other side, we need to have a good, close relationship with them. That aspect is an area of we have a lot of issues with. I think we tend to be very authoritarian. So I think the issue is, how do you exercise parental authority without being authoritarian? It's something we all need to think very, very, we need to reflect on. We need to think about it every single day. when I was in China, the environment is there. The child is supposed to listen to the parents. It's the social norm, and it's the whole environment. Child need to respect the father, and the respect is assumed just because we're the parent. But here in the US, it's different. The respect is not assumed. The respect cannot be demanded. Respect has to be earned. That's the huge difference, different culture. You can't say that you have to do this because I said so. And then your child, why do I have to do it because you said so? Because I'm your dad. You have to listen to me because I'm your dad, or I'm your mom. You have to listen to me. And that doesn't translate here in the US. The child would say, why? Why? So you cannot assume you have the respect. You cannot assume you have the authority. So you have to earn it. So it's important to lead by example. You mentioned that interpersonal skills. You mentioned that communication skill is also
right.
a very important part of the interpersonal skills, right? If we don't practice that skill with our children wouldn't be able to learn that skill. Our children learn by watching us. If we are authoritarian, our children will use that same approach. If we easily get angered, our children will be easily get angered when they enter the society. If we are not empathetic, don't stand in other people's shoes, just think from other people's perspective, or if we don't do that to our children, first try to understand them, try to validate their feelings, try to look at things from their perspective. If we don't do that, our children wouldn't have the habit of doing that to other people. So I think it's like we have to set example. We have to lead by setting examples, by doing things rather than by demanding things, doing things ourselves. It's easy. It feels like authoritarian approach is very easier, right? You just issue demand. You just issue commandment. Say you do this and do that. And if you don't do that, I punish you. It's very easy approach, efficient approach, but it's not sustainable. It's not, because your child will grow up to a certain age, he will rebel. He will not do that anymore. When they're small, probably up to the age of 14, you can force something onto them. You can force them to do things. But once they cross the age of 14 to 15, doesn't work anymore. If you don't get into the habit of respecting them as equal, persuade them to do things rather than command them to do things, then you will have huge difficulty when they enter the teenage age. You will have no influence on them. Zero influence. You'll feel every day is a struggle. And it's horrible. You feel like you're losing control of your child. And your child is distancing away from you. And you can't do anything. It's not like in China, you can punish the child anymore. You can physically punish the child into submission. You can't do that in the US.
Right.
And because the child will call 911, right? And if we don't practice at early age, when they're small, when they're easy to deal with, because it's easy when they're small. You just say, you have to do this. Then they follow through. But even when it's easy, don't be tempted to do that. Always trying to give them equal respect and trying to persuade them using persuasive power rather than using the authoritarian power to have them to do things. When you try to persuade, kind of like you try to persuade your colleague to do certain things, right? You cannot issue order to your colleague to do things. Just treat your child as just like your colleague. And yeah, it's because I have that bad experience with my son.
Right.
I used to be able to just force him to do anything. But when he reached a certain age, it doesn't work anymore. Yeah. I think a lot of parents at my age with grown-up children probably can identify with me, can understand what I'm talking about. The younger parents with younger children, you still have chance to change your approach so you don't damage your relationship with the child. And then, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was especially interesting that you brought up treat your child like they're a colleague, because for a lot of children, or at least for a lot of my classmates, they just want to be heard. They just want to be appreciated for what they've been doing. Mm-hmm. Even if you feel like they're not being appreciative of their situation or they're not respecting you, it's kind of, you need to think about it as a relationship rather than as a, I am the parent, this is my child, I need to tell them what to do. Right. Because yeah, they need guidance, but it's hard for them to accept that guidance if they don't feel like you're understanding where they're coming from as well. A lot of times it's mutual respect that's important.
Right.
And you need to think about it as when people are teenagers, it's also like the whole hormone thing too. Right. You're like, why is my kid changing all of a sudden at 14 and 15? They're not listening to me anymore. Well, they're growing up and they have all of those emotions coming from, being a teenager. Even if you feel like you listened to your parents when you were a child, there's definitely times where you probably lashed out or you were probably emotional at times. You need to understand that when they're 14 or 15, they're experiencing those similar emotions, even if they're not in the similar situation that you're in. Right.
That's a great point, Elise, especially the emotional part and having an emotional connection. That is the prerequisite in order to have any influence on a child, having any ability to persuade a child. That's a great point. I mean, you mentioned that a lot of time, it really, in the teenage age, they really don't know why they behave that way. We need to understand them. We need to understand that's just being a teenager. Yeah. And we need to, first accept that kind of feeling, accept their emotion, because if we don't, no one would, right? Especially middle schoolers, they're nasty to each other. And in a school, they have a lot of, the kids, they have, especially boys, they could have a lot of issues. You tease, especially Asian boys can easily get teased in the school for just being Asian. And they need an outlet for their emotion to come out. And the family, the home, need to play that role. The parents need to be the outlet so they can vent out their frustrations, vent out their emotion to their parents. And the parents can accept that and understand that and sometimes that's all what takes to have a good relationship with the child. Just identify with their emotion. Yeah, it's a great point. At least you mentioned that. I started to learn that with my daughter. When
Right.
she was in high school. She went through a lot of emotional high and lows, and I feel like I could respond in kind. I feel like I was almost about to explode, but I controlled myself. I quietly listened to her and let her calm down and affirm her feelings. And then after she's calmed down, then we can have good conversations. And the important thing is I try to listen more than I talk. If I keep talking, it'll turn her off.
Right.
Yeah, I have to listen more rather than just all the time talking to her. I like to talk, but she has to give me the chance. Otherwise, she will shut me off. I wouldn't be able to get her ears. Yeah.
I think a lot of people just need to learn to listen more, because everyone to some extent wants to talk about themselves. It's just who they trust talking to that they begin to talk about themselves more to. So someone brought up that to them, gratitude and respect to parents is given and natural. And I would agree with that to a certain extent. Gratitude, especially in Asian households, is generally a natural thing. It's just a very cultural aspect of being in a Chinese American household.
Mm-hmm.
And while it doesn't really, for some people, it doesn't feel like they're being respected at home. I mean, children and parents alike. But I do want you to know from a second generation perspective that children really appreciate their parents in the very public sense. When they're talking to their classmates, we're not complaining about our parents. It's more so just talking about how their parents have helped them, or being very respectful to their elders in their family. So I just want that to be kind of a silver lining, that no matter what you're going through at home, just know that your child is being very appreciative of you in a public scope. And you need to understand that at home, it's generally the most vulnerable situation that your child is in. So if they're being emotional, it's most likely that they trust you and that they feel safe around you, though sometimes it might not feel that way. And
speaking of gratitude, I want to make it clear that I don't want to give a false impression that that I don't think it's important. It's not important that the child should respect their parents. I think it is important. I think we need to teach our child, as parents, we need to teach our child to be grateful to their parents, also respectful of their parents. That's for sure. But what I was talking about, I guess for a lot of parents out there, I was talking about is we need to do that in a way that in a way that it's easier for our children to accept. Yeah,
right.
We cannot, it's respectful way, right? So, yeah, and the other thing is, I want to say again, I don't want to give the wrong impression that we should not set high expectations for our children. We do want to set high expectations, but we need to allow failures. Set high expectation, but allow failure. Allow our children fail to meet that expectation, because they reward their efforts rather than outcome, right? You set the high expectation. If they achieve it, it's good. As long as they have made the efforts, you should appreciate more the efforts rather than the final outcome. Even they may not be able to achieve that high expectation, but they tried, and you should appreciate that. So
definitely. Again, the small things should be rewarded, even if they don't seem like super huge, accomplishments. if you see them working to improve themselves, working to change the way they act at home, that is something that should definitely be affirmed.
Yeah.
So I think now we're going to move on to talk a little bit more about how in Asian households, it's important to have that sort of academic achievement. So do you have any suggestions for Asian parents and teens who are stressed about college admissions? Because we've seen a huge reduction of Chinese American acceptances in prestigious schools over the past few years.
Yes, yeah. I fully understand the concerns out there. I do think the college admission process, there is discrimination against Asians, clearly. Also, I recognize getting into a good college is important, right? To be honest, it's important.
Definitely.
But it's not end all be all, right? It's not like if you get into the college, everything will fall into place. That's not the case. I want to remind a lot of us that many of us did not get into the great college. I didn't go to Beida, right? I didn't go to Tsinghua, Keda, and many of my colleagues, they turned out to be okay, and I turned out to be okay. I didn't go to great college. One, it's a good one. Hopefully, the university is not listening today. I'm dissing my own alma mater. It's not good. But anyways, I turned out to be okay. I would say many people who did go to great college, they also turned out to be okay or just okay. So I don't think going to college is the key, right? Going to good college is the key. It's important, but it's not end all be all type of thing. Instead of focusing on the discrimination in college admission, we should focus on more prevailing social stereotype and prejudice. I think the discrimination in terms of college admission pales in comparison in the broader, deeper discrimination in the society. And those kind of discrimination is more detrimental to any one of us. We have heard the term bamboo seating, right? So if you advance in certain stage of your career, you just can't go beyond that seating because there's a lot of stereotypes against us out there. So just as statistics, right? I think Harvard probably had each year admit about 30% Asian kids, right? But if you look at the leadership position in various fields,
right?
Asians in 30%? No.
Yeah,
or Chinese in, we actually, if you talk about relative discrimination, college admission is the least discriminative environment. The society is more discriminative. So many people graduated from Harvard. Where did they end up? Right? So what's the point? To fight for that if we cannot change the broader societal problems. And in Chinese, there is a phrase called 所争者小，不争者大. It describes a phenomenon that we are fighting for tiny, small things, but leaving critical things, overlooking critical things. I think college admission is tiny, tiny things. The broader social justice is the real issue we all need to fight for. So I think many of you out there, you have a boss who is not from Ivy League school, right? You have boss coming from just state college. Yeah, is Ivy League good school important? Yes, it's good to have Ivy League diploma, but it's not something you should fight tooth and nail for.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's more important to find what makes you happy and find what makes you interested in, at least from the second generation perspective, than to get into a good school. Because I know a lot of my friends' siblings, they get into a good school, they're going into STEM, and then halfway through they realize that they don't enjoy what they're doing. And then they go through this whole crisis of finding what they enjoy, or if they should just continue pursuing something that they were always told to pursue when they were younger. And even though they're in a good college, they're not necessarily succeeding. So it's important to remember that if someone is truly passionate about something, it's much more likely that they'll be able to succeed there because they really research more about it, they learn more about it, and you can really tell that they're passionate about it. And that really helps someone succeed, at least from my point of view.
Right.
So I think let's go on to the next question. So over the summer before the school year, because we have around half the summer left before the school year, what do you suggest both parents and children do to prepare for the new school year? How do you think people should change the way they communicate or interact with others for the transition?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, guess I'll speak from my own experience. How do I prepare? You know, it's very tough to get back into the routine. I started to go back to normal, go back to the office now, and it's very tough. I have to get up early, right? So I guess the main concern is about our children. I think the school environment in some areas you will have I would say pretty toxic environment for our children to go back to school. You know, the Asian hates we have witnessed last year. I think that is always the undercurrent. Even in a very, very liberal, diverse place like Northern Virginia, Maryland, we have heard incidences of hate, mostly not physical, it's more in the language. So I think we, as parents, we need to be aware of that. We need to pay more attention to how our children behave. If there is any abnormal pattern or any abnormal behavior, we need to be on top of that. I don't know what we can. I think, you know, try to be supportive rather than trying to take it on your own, trying to go to school to make a big fuss about it. Because in the end, your child has to deal with that in the school day in and day out. It's not you. You can go to the school to complain. I'm for to go to school to complain to the principal, but we have to understand that even with the complaint, things may not change immediately. So it's more emotional support for the child is more important. Sometimes they may not need help other than just knowing that we are always there for them. Because, you know, it's something they have to deal with. But we need to be there when they need help from us, when they need emotional support from us.
Definitely. And you brought up quite a few good points there that, yeah, the emotional support is basically one of the main responsibilities that a parent should hold, because we don't really know what our parents are going through that much. And I assume that many parents don't know what their children are going through. And as long as you're able to listen, as long as both parties are able to communicate with one another, just kind of being the house being kind of like a place for support and guidance is definitely crucial. So when we're talking about finding passions, you have a lot of experience with changing careers, changing degrees, and really searching for what you find that makes you happy. So how do you know what you are passionate about? Like, how would you give advice to someone on how to find what they're passionate about? And is everyone able to find something that makes them happy?
Yeah, I think it typically is that what are you good at? You tend to be passionate about, right? So, because if you're good at something, you will feel more satisfied to do that kind of thing. So, if your career is aligned with your interests, that would be great, right? So, for me, I think in the beginning, I did not understand myself. I was lucky to have someone who was a business school professor. And we go to the same church, and he has observed me for many years. He knew me very well. When I seek advice from him, he actually provided option and provided also recommendation. So, and made a lot of sense to me. I think a lot of times you may not know yourself as well as a third party. So it's always good to listen to a third party. For young people out there, when you don't know your passion or what you're good at, it may be helpful to seek advice from other people who may know you, people who are older than you, who have more experience in life. You can seek advice from them. Especially for those who are already graduated from college, started their job, still not know whether that's the job they want to settle in forever. For those people, still stay in touch with your college classmates, see how they're doing, and also seek help from maybe alumni of your school, and also seek mentor at your workplace. I think getting help from other people can be very helpful, can be very productive than just trying to figure out on your own. That's my experience.
For sure. I think that relying on others is a lot more helpful than some people initially think. Like with me, I can't say I have something in particular that I'm most interested in, but a lot of my interests have come from relying on others. A lot of times I'll join a club or I'll join something at my high school because my friends are doing it. And then I eventually become more interested in it than my friends ever were. And that's something that's a phenomenon to me, because you never really think that you are going to eventually become more interested in someone else, even though they initially started being interested in it before you. So you really need to be able, again, to take risks. And a lot of these risks come from relying on others and listening to other people's guidance and feedback. So you told us that with your experience, you had those people to be able to guide you and let you know what to do, how to take the next step, even though you were kind of late in the stage to finding what you're passionate about.
Right.
For me, I'm lucky that I'm earlier in the stage and I'm able to kind of understand other people's experiences and use that for myself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's there's another point I want to make is that because we the parents tend to focus on the grades, focus on academic performance. Sometimes we overlook the importance of making connection with other people, right? So I would say that for the college students out there, when you're in the college, in universities, obviously grades are still important, but it's not enough. Having good grades is not enough. You need to explore more, and spend more time with other people, and also utilize your school's career office. Go to the career office and get some advice on how to write your resume. Also get some advice about different career paths for whatever fields you are studying. And when you listen more, you will discover slowly what might be suitable for you. So keep an open mind rather than every day just go into the class and finish your homework, get good grades. And those are important, but also keep an open mind of other things, making connection with people, making connection with recruiters in the campus, right? So it's very important. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I want to open this up to some more of the audience now. We're gonna, if you people want to talk about what they do at home that they found really works, because neither Paul nor I are really professionals in parenting or any of that. So if any of you have found things that really help with your children, or if you have any more questions about things that you're struggling with at home, we'd really appreciate people typing in the chat. A lot of the things that I've brought up are from people in the chat, so really appreciate that. So I'm going to just move on to, should we move on to the portion that's just questions, or should we keep going with the prompts?
Hi, Alice. So I think some audience already left some questions in the chat box. I'm
Right.
not sure if you cover most of it or.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but I mean, we can go through the list if we're still missing out some questions. And after that, maybe we can give everybody to let them open their mic to answer, to ask the question if they want.
All right, that sounds good. So we have a question here. They're asking that it's important to, first of all, they're saying that it's important to be giving respect to children and for children to pay their respects back to the parents. But what do you think are the core things that, sorry, I'm not really sure what this question is asking. Let me see, let me look at another question. So there's someone asking about, let me just find it. Okay, there's someone asking about for people going in and exploring what they love to do after college, for a lot of children going after college and exploring what they like to do. Would it be fair to have them kind of support themselves financially, or do you think it's a parent's responsibility to continue guiding their children throughout college and after college?
You mean the financial support?
Both financially and with parental guidance.
Yeah, I think parental guidance for sure, right? Especially when they seek your guidance, and even they don't seek your guidance, you want to keep tab on them, trying to know what they're up to. It's it's important. In terms of financial support, yeah, I would say, you know, giving them more independence is good. So they know that, you know, they have to rely on their own, right? I know we love them. We all, most of the Chinese families, they don't allow their kids to borrow on student loans. They just pay for the college tuition. So many other kids don't have that luxury, you know. That's, you know, because of the love from the parents, we pay for the college and everything. But once they're out of college, especially they're working, I guess the financial part need to stop there just for their benefit, right? So my daughter, she voluntarily said she doesn't want me to support her financially anymore. So she just graduated from college this year. She's going to have a job soon, actually next week, next Monday. So she already set up her own bank account, her own credit card and everything. So I think it's teaching them how to manage their own finances is also very important. I'm a financial analyst, so you know, yeah. If I think even you're not a financial analyst, I think it's still important to teach kids to be financially savvy, right? I mean, I spend about an hour to teach my daughter what's credit card, what's the difference between credit card and debit card, and what you need to pay attention when you receive credit card bill, how much you should pay, how do you avoid paying the interest charge and all that thing. You know, they don't naturally know. And when they receive a credit card bill, there is a minimum payment. They just pay the minimum. They incur interest expense. A lot of people don't know that. Oh, I just need to pay the minimum, right? So it's something you want to probably talk to the children about that. You know, ask them to read the fine prints of the credit card agreements. Yeah. So a lot of financial aspect, you know, they need to be financially savvy. They cannot always rely on you. You have to teach them, to be financially independent.
Right. So we're getting a bunch of questions in the chat. So I'm just going to ask this question, and then someone also asked if you're supposed to raise hands before you start speaking. Yes, that would be greatly appreciated. So everyone who has a question after we cover the next question I'm going to ask, please raise your hand and we can call on you to ask your question yourself. And
Elise,
also we would, oh, yeah?
Yeah, there is a question from Rich. I think he asked the question about perhaps the Chinese culture, a China connection on all that thing.
Right.
I guess I assume that's what he meant to ask. And do you think that's an interesting question to address? Yeah.
I wasn't too sure what they're asking, but if you're able to rephrase what they're asking.
Yeah, he said to be patient, giving more respect is what I'm learning now and not grow with my kids. What's the core spirit as a Chinese parents given to her? I guess, you know, what can we impart to our children?
Okay.
Maybe from the cultural heritage point of view, or I don't know. That's how I interpret his question. Yeah. I think this is the part, this in terms of culture, East-West culture, and this is very dear to my heart. And, you know, I have a lot of reflection on this, and I really want to share my view. You know, my generation and people older than I am,
right.
We have a love and hate relationship with Chinese culture, to be honest with you. I love because we are Chinese, right? And hate is that we felt like China was so backward for so many years, you know, since the Opium War. The reason for our backwardness is because our culture is not fit for modernity. And we want to be westernized. And many of us, I'm saying in a straight face to be very direct, very honest with you, probably not politically correct.
Okay.
Many of us have very dim view about Chinese culture, to be honest with you. My generation, growing up during Cultural Revolution, growing up in almost poverty, in American standard, absolute poverty. It's just economic backwardness of China has been so tremendous. And I came to this state in 1991. And when I was in China, my income was like about 80 yuan per month. That's about $10. Incredible. Imagine Chinese people living in that kind of economic condition, still feeling proud of their own culture. That's very difficult, right? So when we come to the United States, we always want to assimilate into the American culture. We want to be westernized. We learn Western music, we learn their language. We actually change our names to Western names. Me being there, my Chinese name is different, right? I use the Paul as the westernized names. So, and we have a tendency to trying to westernize ourselves. In that process, we lost our own identity. We also probably not emphasizing our own culture enough that actually that affected our children's identity formation. They also struggled with their own identity as well. And it's also affecting our social profile, the whole community. When we don't have a strong identity, we're trying to be like whites, trying to be the mainstream white people, right? Just trying to whitewash ourselves. Yeah. And the parents trying to whitewash ourselves, and we trying to whitewash our children to be kind of like white, and not holding on to our cultural identity. That has implication, and it actually is detrimental to our professional development, detrimental to our whole community's influence, our whole community's impact, social impact. So, but I see the change now because the economic development in China, and the newer immigrants are more confident in our own self, and also there is a growing confidence and growing appreciation about Chinese culture. So I see there is something changing. I think is a welcome change.
Yeah. So you mentioned a lot about how, like, when
Hey Paul, this is Rich. Can I add something?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry
thank
for
you for your
disruption.
time to answer my question. Really appreciate. Yeah, so I'm actually not using Chinese culture here. I'm just using China connection.
Okay.
Yeah, so the reason I'm saying something here is because you absolutely agree with you for like a Chinese identity, I think Chinese character related topic. So here, what I heard some story here is that my friends ever being asked by his son, say, we are in America now. We left China already. Why we still need to speak Chinese? Yeah, so this is one question. I also read another article saying that actually a kid from San Jose, he said that he don't want to eat Chinese food. He hates Chinese food, and then after 20 years old later, he actually turned his back He said that this is something belongs to his nation. That is something actually in his blood. Yeah. So yes, what I really feel struggling is that we all living in America now. Actually, due to the pandemic, we even don't have once a year going back to China.
Right.
We're not giving a chance for the kids to really see and learn what the China really be now.
Right.
So this is somehow an unfair education for the kids groups, right? We all put them in a pure American education system now. So I'm not giving the kids my justice here. I just want them to see, want them to learn, want them to have their own opinion about about the homeland they should belong to before. Yeah.
Right, Rich. I got your question. I think you raised a very important question. I think it's very common among the Chinese. They take a 0 or 1 view about identity. Now we're Americans. Why do we emphasize our Chineseness, right? So I think there is a different perspective, is that you can be both 100% Chinese and both 100% American. And that's a perspective I feel I like that kind of perspective. And I got that from the San Francisco State University former president of San Francisco State University. His name is Dr. Wang. And he said that he's a Mexican Chinese. His mother is Mexican, Spanish Mexican, and his father is Chinese. But he said, I can be 100% Mexican, I can be 100% American, I can be 100% Chinese. You don't have to give up your heritage in order to be American. You can be both, and that's a wonderful thing. It seems that a lot of the Chinese have this, we have this tendency, feeling that we have to be something, we have to reject something in order to be something. We cannot have it both. But the wonderful thing is we can have it both. And in fact, there is a tremendous advantage of having both. We can get the best from both cultures. And in fact, it could enrich America, right? So I do think the Chinese culture is quite unique. In many aspects, is diametrically opposite of American culture. But I would say that having this perspective, a completely different, sometimes diametrically opposing perspective about things, about society, about a lot of things, I think it's an enriching experience. I think it's a good thing. And it could contribute to right now to the discourse, political or social discourse in America. I think we need to bring our unique perspectives to the front. We need to provide that unique perspective. And regarding our children, should we bring our children back to China to educate them, to let them see for themselves? I 100% think that's a good thing. And I also think that the rise of China is good for Chinese Americans or for East Asian Americans, not just Chinese Americans. I mean, back in the 80s and a little bit 90s, Japan was rising, and America had a lot of problems with the Japanese at that time, similar to what they're having problems with Chinese right now. And Japan was viewed as an evil empire trying to overthrow the American leadership, trying to change the American way of life. And there were a lot of articles, a lot of even novels about the evil intent of the Japanese trying to undermine American society. Very similar to what right now. But now, if you look back, Japanese right now is viewed as in very positive light. I think eventually, hopefully, I think perhaps Americans' perspective of China could change. And I think it's not even ideological. I think it's more the economic rivalry between the two countries. And eventually, both need to accept each other. I think it's good. It created a lot of opportunities for us and our children. I got into business in late 90s, and I got into the financial industry. In 2000, 2001, when I go to conferences in New York City, sponsored by Wall Street, I rarely see any Chinese face at that time. When I go into a meeting, everybody's eyes are looking at me. It's basically saying that, who are you? Why are you here? Right? It's kind of like, I feel like, I can feel that. But nowadays, you see so many Chinese faces. And Wall Street firms are rolling up the carpet to welcome people with Chinese background because they have to do business in China. It creates good opportunities for our children, career-wise. It's certainly a good thing. I don't understand some of the people who are who feel like they have to reject China in order to be accepted by America. I don't understand that. I could say I can't understand that, but I wouldn't accept that from my own perspective.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring in a couple points here. There were some questions about social media. If you guys want to ask those questions, please raise your hand to ask them. And before we allow Helen to ask the question, I'm just going to mention from my perspective how I view Chinese culture and how a lot of my classmates view their own heritage. I live in a place where there's a lot of appreciation of international culture. When I traveled to China a lot as a kid because my mom had a lot of business in China. And growing up, learning about China was entirely different from going to China myself. Everything that the American education has set up is just sort of how exotic China is, and the whole sort of Oriental aspect of China. So they make it seem that China is a very primitive country and that China is not as advanced. Whereas when I traveled to China, it is way safer and way more advanced there than I'd ever thought it was. I mean, when I was younger, I even went on a train by myself from Shanghai to Hangzhou. So I was able to sort of experience just how safe it was to be traveling around in China. I even took a plane by myself from Shanghai to Guangzhou. So I really came to appreciate Chinese culture, and I really came to appreciate just everything about it. I even was able to join the Chinese Culture Club at my school and become the president of that club because of how interested I was in culture. So while that's kind of a huge difference I see with the first and second generation. I think the first generation is taught to kind of adapt to American society, and by American society kind of whitewash themselves.
Right.
But what I found with a lot of my peers is they're very prideful about their culture, at least where I'm from. Though I do know that a lot of other people struggle with their own heritage. A lot of other children struggle with their heritage, and a lot of that comes from their environment. So I do think it's important to allow your children to sort of understand exactly where their culture is coming from. I mean, China is way more advanced and way more modern than I'd ever learned in my textbooks at school. So now that people are able to ask questions, I'm just going to call on Helen to ask her question. Helen, if you would like to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you, Liz and Paul. We were actually at an event today for Asian American leaders, and Lily, she's only 6 years old. She was sharing about her experience as 6 years old, and also a couple of unpleasant experience, being a victim of bias. For example, the sometimes teachers in the early childhood learning center would not really, embrace how diverse she is, because she's Hungarian, Polish, Chinese, Jewish, and Austria. So she's like a little UN. And unfortunately, where she is, it's really not that diverse. So many times, she feel, her voice is not heard. At 6 years old, that's why, actually she wrote a poem on love, peace, and unity. And we were trying to really help the early childhood community learn about, the people of color history, cultures, and stories, struggles, and strength. And I was looking through the comments while I was listening. I feel, very connected to some of the comments, because it is hard to really appreciate the melting pot culture in America, because there's not much struggles, like the European countries. Actually, all the cultures and history are from Asia, and Europe. So when we are in those countries, we feel, more connected, because that's where we're coming from. And here I feel it's a lot of comfort. People don't trust what they don't understand, but in order to how people understand, you have to educate them, starting from as young as 6 years old. And I feel, what would be the solution as a community, Chinese community, to help, like my kids, because they are in between cultures all the time. And I'm trying to speak Chinese to them only. And, also other languages that they will learning in the community. I'm wondering, if we can do a project for, children and family in terms of cultural sensitivity project or something, or maybe even like a flashcard. So I was thinking, like, what would be something we can do as a community at large? And I can send you more of my observations to you, Paul, actually directly too, just to see what kind of feedback you all have, because we're trying to have something that we can contribute to the school system, K to 12. But in this case, it's 6 to 12 years old, this age range, to see what we can do as young as 6 years old to help the community and schools to have more teachers of color and have more I'm sorry, I'm by the beach, so the reception is not that good. I'm trying to have the best reception on my audio, so it's not like frozen or cut off when the video is turned off, and the kids are right here trying to have the best sound. But I would like to see if there's any proposal, any of you have. I can leave my email there, and I'm trying to propose to the Department of Education for the early childhood learning, in this area, because what is the saying in Chinese, 3岁看大7岁看老, and that's a very critical age, between 3 to 7, and then now we're talking about 6 to 12 years old. And I would love to share your observations and your stories, so perhaps we can combine it as a book. And it's just so important for us to really, really stand strong on our own culture, so we're not confused and the kids are not confused. And when they are communicating, interacting with their teachers, they can stand up for themselves too, when the teachers are not really, educating in the cultural sensitivity. Yeah, and I will leave my contact in the comments.
Yeah,
and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Helen. I think it should start from our families, right? From the home. So we need to be consciously educating our kids about Chinese culture. I think that's the first step. before we even, I think right now there is such hostility towards China and Chinese, having the K to 12, having Chinese culture in K to 12 is probably not very realistic. And we're trying to push Asian American history into the curriculum. I know that in some states they have mandated Asian American history being taught in the schools, but that is very difficult effort. And I think what we can do the least is that we, the parents, we can educate our children of the culture. We can present a more balanced and positive perspective about Chinese culture.
Yeah, just to add on really quick before we go to the next question, Helen, I really appreciate that you're taking this initiative to help educate people about Chinese culture and really what it is, because a lot of people don't understand that. It's not really brought up really. So now we're going to go on to the next question. We really appreciate your initiative. And if anyone has any ideas on how to bring this initiative about, please contact Helen at the email address that she listed below. So now we're going to go on to Skywalker. I think that's your name. And
Skywalker.
Okay, what question do you have for today?
First of all, I truly appreciate for your guys' time. I know that this is weekend and you guys just spend your own personal time. Also that the release your Mandarin is truly impressive. And Dr. Paul, you are very knowledgeable, I truly appreciate. So I do have two questions. One is for the Elise, the other is for the Dr. Paul. I know that many parents are waiting for the question. I'm trying to make my question as short as possible. So my first question, for the Elise. So I have two examples for the identity. If we look at the Jewish history, they have been wandering in this world about 3,000 years, but they keep their identity very well. They didn't lose their own culture, their own identity. So my second example that I have a workmate. So she's from Germany. So she lost all the German heritage. She doesn't know how to speak German anymore. I had a conversation with her. I asked her that do you feel regret that you lost your German identity? She mentioned that I don't. I feel okay. I feel Canada is my home. Also that I'm a person more than a language, more than a culture. So I'd like to know, it is as a second generation, what do you think about these two different examples?
Do you mind rephrasing your question? Are you asking about how to preserve our culture? Is that your question?
Sure. So my question is, for example, we have I just gave two examples. One is about Jewish history. They just take their identity, their culture very serious. They didn't get assimilated to the local society. The second example is my workmate. So she feels that although she lost the German heritage, she doesn't speak German anymore, but she feels pretty comfortable. She feels that as a person, she's more than a language, more than a culture, So from her feedback, look at the keeping identity is not a priority at all, because as as a person, you are more than your own heritage. So I'd like to hear it is as the second generation of Chinese. Do you think that the keeping Chinese identity is very important, or it's yeah? Did I make myself?
Yeah, that makes sense. For sure.
Yeah, okay.
I can answer.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. So I think as a second generation Chinese American, having that culture is an important aspect. I mean, for a lot of people, having that sort of background is a main part of their personality, but it's not something that I really think about when I'm interacting with others who are Chinese American. Like, for instance, I think this is a huge difference between first and second generation. We don't really think about people's ethnicities or backgrounds from like first viewing them, right?
Mhm.
So when we're talking with others, it's more so just, oh, you are an individual and we're talking to you, because that's kind of the way that we've been raised to be. We've been raised to be, kind of like the melting pot, right?
Right.
But I do personally think that it is a responsibility to maintain your culture and be able to preserve that culture, because I mean, we can't just let our Chinese culture kind of disappear. That's kind of upsetting to be thinking about, especially for a lot of parents. I know that their concern is their child isn't learning the language, or they aren't as interested in the culture as they should be. And again, I think that's because they're not getting the right kind of exposure. So I think Paul brought up a good point earlier that a lot of parents might not be very comfortable with who they are, even with who they are as a Chinese individual. So you need to bring up that confidence for younger individuals to appreciate their culture and be able to spread that. That's what I've found in my community that has worked very well. A lot of my friends are very proud of their backgrounds, are very proud of their ethnicities. And if they don't really care as much about it, then I don't see the issue. But for those who are disappointed about who they are, disappointed that they're a Chinese American instead of anything else, you really need to emphasize the importance of having that cultural connection. Like, I personally am very proud of being a Chinese American. Even with all the discrimination that's going on right now, it's important to be vocal and be confident about who you are, rather than go the other way and completely whitewash yourself.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
Go ahead. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So if you don't have another question, I think I'm going to move on to the next one. So I guess we're going to go to Leo. Leo, what question do you have for today?
So I had a question about video games.
Yeah.
How much video games do you suggest for middle schoolers to play every week?
Right. Yeah, this is definitely a problem that has been growing over time. So especially over the pandemic, a lot of people have been very involved with social media and gaming, because that's the only vice that they can really go to. That's the only thing that they're really interested in now, because they can't go out and do their other hobbies or passions. They can't communicate with their friends. So this is definitely a very pressing question, and a lot of people are very interested in it. So I'm going to go on to Paul, because he's actually a parent, about how he guides his children with gaming and social media. What are your views on that, Paul?
Sure. Hi, Elise. My daughter is not a gamer. She doesn't play a lot of video game, but it's when she was last pandemic year, she spent the whole year here in the family. She was not at the college, so there's time that she spent too much time closed up in her home, in her house, in her room, not going out. So we are concerned. We were concerned. My wife and I both were concerned about, it's not good for her, in terms of health. So I think we're trying to be gentle to her, but we also want to express our concern, right? If you spend too much time in your room and don't go out, it's not going to it's not good. We don't know what she's doing. She may be doing her homework, because she may be on the social network, on the social media, talking to her friends. But we try to encourage her to go out. We're trying to arrange activities, family activities, so we can do together to distract her from just closed up in her room. So I think it's important to show your concern, also be gentle, and find ways to solve that problem. I think the third point of finding ways to solve the problem is also important. If you just say, don't play video games when you can't provide alternatives, that'll be a little bit difficult. If you can provide an alternative, like, for example, the whole family having some activities together, I think that will make your advice, not playing video game, easier to accept.
Yeah, and I think from my personal experience, because I haven't done much gaming, but my brothers are very into gaming, and I'm quite into social media. So I'll just answer it from my experience. My brothers are in college now, but during high school, one of them was very into gaming, and my parents were very concerned about this, right? As parents should be, because it definitely detracts from social life and education in a couple of ways, though there are a lot of benefits from gaming as well. Mm-hmm. So they were very concerned overall about how his future was going to be once he got into college. And when the pandemic hit, they actually saw a huge change in his personality. Because in high school, he had experienced the failures in high school from gaming, or perhaps, he wasn't getting the results that he really wanted to get in high school. He was really able to change his personality around and be a much more determined individual. And so I don't necessarily think that gaming is such a bad thing. It's not really bad to be into video games. I know a lot of people who have a lot of friends and are very social because of gaming. Right. And from my brother's point of view, he really stepped up and he became much more determined after experiencing the consequences and the successes from being online more. For me, I was on social media a lot, and from that point of view, yeah, there were some negative effects, right? I had to step up my academic goals and my academic perseverance, but also I struggled with just sort of talking to people in person. So by kind of failing with social media, I personally learned how to communicate with others in person and how to really monitor how I was communicating with others, how to listen to others. And that's why I think, and with social media and gaming, you learn a lot too. It's not just, blind content. You're learning a lot about the world and you're learning a lot about others around you. So that's kind of also a difference with the first and second generation. Because of the platforms that we're on, the first generation doesn't really see it as something beneficial. It's kind of targeted toward younger audiences. So it's not really something that everyone can understand. But from the second generation's point of view, this is a way that they communicate with their friends. This is a way where they learn a lot of content, and it really makes them better prepared for a more tech-savvy world. So overall, it's a difficult problem for parents to solve because it's something that a lot of parents don't really understand. And it's also something that is difficult to put authority on. Mm-hmm. So you really need to, again, talk to your child, ask them how they're doing, and kind of open up conversation at home about social media use and what they're learning from it even, because a lot of times they're learning more than you think. Yeah, that's at least my perspective on it. So do we have any more questions? You guys want to put more questions in the chat? Yeah, and some people ask me how old I am. I am 17 and I'm going to be turning 18 next year. I'm going to be a senior next year. And so some ways that you can reach out to me is you can join the coffee club group chat, and there are a lot of contacts in there who can reach out to me. That's probably the best way. I'm not sure if I can really have another way to best communicate with me for this. So I think I'm going to hand this over to, oh yeah, do we have a question?
Sorry, yes. And Alice, so my son is 14 years old, and nowadays he is on the summer vacation, but I just registered for him as 3 weeks sports camp. But I think the problem is for him the time management, because after 3 weeks, there is still the on almost 1 month. So I'm worried about it when he stay home alone. So how did he the time make good the time management, because he will play the game, but 14 years old, but you are 17 years old. So in your experience, though, how to handle? I'm as a parent, so I don't know how to make it good. So could you please share your experience to me? Okay, thank you.
For sure. I'm not a parent, so I don't have, again, I'm not like a professional with any of this. But I can say that at my household, we didn't really have anything with the time management sort of thing. But we definitely, we would just, it's kind of experience-based, right? Because your son is 14.
Yeah, maybe a little bit teenager, a little bit, not too.
Yeah, he's going into that teenage stage. So it's really important to just kind of communicate with him and ask him how, I think in general, it's just the most important thing for a parent to do is communicate, because you can't necessarily regulate all of the activities that your child is doing. As long as your child trusts you, and as long as your child understands where you're coming from, it's a lot easier to regulate activity. At least when I'm with my parents, I find myself listening to what they say more when they listen to my problems and when we come up with a solution together. I'm not necessarily sure if that answers your question. Is that where you're coming from?
Yes, thank you. But yes. Actually, for me, I think I give enough freedom to him, but I think it's not enough for a teenager. So I just want him that maybe the balance the time for study and game and sports. Make balance. But
I think it's a struggle.
Okay.
It's a struggle for a lot of families that, I mean, especially for teenage kids. How do you make sure they don't spend too much time on gaming, on social media? They still need to do their work. I think that's a constant struggle. I don't think there's any solution. I teach at church, Sunday school. Many parents are saying to me that their kids having problems. They wait to the last minute to finish homework and all that thing. So is that when I think back when I was that age, I was probably doing the same, right? So I think it's just that age, and the concept of time management, I learned that only very late in my life. So if you want to communicate time management to your 14-year-old, that would be very difficult. I guess
it's very complicated. For me also it's a problem, but even for the children, for the guys. So you mean that just let him be?
Yeah, not, you know, you always want to guide them. You always want to let them know that you're not happy if they spend too much time on certain activity. You always need to let them know, but also not in a way that's going to damage your relationship with them. Yeah.
I think this is a little bit the skills to communication.
Right, exactly. What, you know, let them know, they know that you are still loving him, but you're not happy about what he's doing.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah, I think Brian brought up a really great point in the chat just now. I think a lot of kids when they were younger played a ton of games. So as they grew up, though, they learned what they really enjoyed, and they definitely learned more about things outside of video games that made them more passionate. So while a lot of kids, they probably won't stop gaming as they grow older, but they've learned to regulate themselves from the activities that they've done. So that's a really great point, and that basically summarizes what I was trying to say. So thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
So time is pretty much up. So for any other questions, you can definitely bring them up later in the coffee club chat, or, you know, to in other platforms, other conversations. So Paul, if you would just like to give away some key giveaways on how to kind of guide your child as they get older, that would be great. Or any key giveaways that you would like to give.
I would say the experience I want to share is that be patient with your child. It's critical. Allow them to give them space, give them time, give them chance to fail and to get up again. It's very important. I think the unconditional love and value them who they are, not what they do. It's very important. Yeah, and the communication is always important. Keep the communication channel open. In order for the communication channel to open, the important thing is we don't speak too much. Let them speak. If we speak too much, they will not communicate with us. So I guess that's a couple of points, simple points. I think I want to share. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to summarize really quickly, what I would say to a lot of kids out there is be sure to communicate your frustrations. I mean, try to open up that conversation. It's not just the parent's responsibility to kind of, you know, open up that conversation. It definitely takes both sides. So sometimes you're not just looking for answers, and we get that. So just make sure to kind of try to tell your parents what you're struggling with and learn to have respect from your side as well, even though it's difficult given the stressful situations that we're in right now. So yeah, thanks to everyone for today. And Coffee Club, if you would like to share the QR code again for those who haven't gotten it yet, that would be great as well.
Thank you, Elise, for your masterful moderating. It's
Thank you.
I think a lot of people were asking your age because you're really mature, and a lot of people probably thought you are in college. Yeah, it's we're so proud of you. It's
Thank you.
It's such a pleasure tonight to talk to you and talk to many parents and children here.
Definitely. Thank you, Paul, and thank you for everyone who brought up questions in the chat and asked questions in person. We really appreciated everyone who is participating in the chat. Definitely helped open the conversation a lot more.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, have a good night. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good
Elise, are you
night.
in the
Thanks.
WeChat group too?
Thank you.
I'm not in the WeChat group yet, but I can be reached from the WeChat group because I have a lot of contacts who are already in the WeChat group. I'm definitely trying to get in soon, sometime soon. But yeah, just make sure if you have any more questions or if you want to reach out to me, be sure to join the WeChat group for sure.
Oh, okay. I thought we can just send you an email directly.
Yeah, sure. I can give my email. So this is the email where you can reach out to me. Let me just put it in the chat right now. Here you go. So if any of you have any more questions, you can ask me here. Again, I'm not the greatest expert on anything, but if there's, especially I encourage the second generation, if you would like to reach out to me, you can reach out here. For parents, you probably get a lot more support in the coffee club group chat.
Okay, thank you, Alice, and thank you, Paul, and thank you, Cassie. So, if you want to connect with Alice, I think Alice, you already share your email address, right, in the chat box. So, I mean, if you want to get more information about our next education webinars, and you can also pay attention to what we post in Coffee Club WeChat groups. Okay, thank you guys very much. Cassie， 您还在吗？
可以。好吧，谢谢大家，已经这么晚了，还有这么多人在线上啊。星期六的晚上，我觉得最重要的是 be happy and healthy， 然后 relax， 真的，孩子长大肯定也是个 journey， 做父母也是个 journey， 不可能永远都是一帆风顺的。我觉得 do things with the kids together, right? And have a shared experience. I think that's the best bonding to have. 这样的话就可以 build up more trust, build up more respect, and stay safe.